This is somewhat of a dark topic, but it is an essential topic that we discuss. As we get through this, I hope you will consider clicking that like button and subscribe to the channel and maybe even leave us a comment. What are your thoughts on the topic of pilots who are flying impaired? Because some of them are, and we'd really like to get that number down to 0. Now back to the episode. I'm going to say something that I'm pretty sure you're not going to like. And I'm pretty sure because I don't like it, but it's still true. It's this: the use of alcohol and drugs is not uncommon in the pilot community, and that's a problem. In 2008, the Department of Transportation and the FAA released a document called Alcohol Related Aviation Accidents Involving Pilots with Previous Alcohol Offenses. Now, this isn't limited to pilots with just alcohol offenses. There are also drug offenses in there. And we do have to consider this because pilots are people. We're just regular people. We have all the foibles of anybody else, and we have the weaknesses, or we're at least susceptible to the weaknesses that can take us down just like anybody else. Now, there are some things that's worth knowing about how the FAA and the aviation industry deals with alcohol and alcohol-related, mostly around cars. This has to do with NHTSA, the National Highway Transportation Safety Board. Now, you probably already know, but pilots are required to report any type of alcohol offense to the FAA. If they were to get stopped for DUI or DWI or OWI, whatever they call it in your jurisdiction, that event has to be reported to the FAA and recorded. Now, some people, especially some people who are maybe having a little problem with alcohol and not able to accept that they're having a problem, they might say, yeah, I got stopped, but I got the ticket, I paid it, I went to the class, it's okay, nobody's ever going to know. Actually, National Highway Transportation Safety Board runs a thing called the National Driver Register. The FAA will periodically make inquiries of the National Driver Register because they want to know if we have any convictions. Have we been stopped for driving while impaired? Well, that's a big deal. So if you choose not to report your issues to the FAA, they very well may find out on their own. And that would be what we call in the industry very bad. Now, it also may surprise you to find pilots who have a history of alcohol abuse aren't necessarily out of the game. You can participate provided you behave yourself through a medical special issuance. And if you can prove 2 years of abstinence through documentation, you can have that special issuance removed and remain a pilot. But it is critically important that each and every one of us recognize that alcohol and drugs while acting as pilot in command is a really bad idea. Now, you may say that's self-evident, but bear with me for a moment. When we drink, and I mean have a drink, our judgment is impaired. Anyone who has been to a college frat party knows there's some validity to this. There's absolutely no doubt that alcohol has an effect on our judgment and our mental processes. It also has a tendency to slow down our reaction time. And that's not great in a dynamic environment like an aircraft where the weather could change. There could be a system issue. I could have a distraction in the cockpit. All of those things are going to be exacerbated if I have been drinking alcohol or taking drugs. Even some over-the-counter drugs will have an effect on me that's going to be detrimental to my ability to fly the airplane reliably and safely. Even our decision-making process itself is going to be affected, and that's a big deal, just as we would see with hypoxia, where people's brains become somewhat muddled and they can't make even the simplest decision. Alcohol abuse is a problem because as we go up, we have less and less pressure, less oxygen. We're going to become more inebriated as we get up in altitude. That level of alcohol intake that you thought was okay on the ground, and it's not. Let me be clear on that. It's absolutely not. That level that you thought was okay is going to get worse as you get it to altitude. That's not the place to find out you're really not capable of piloting the aircraft. Now, you may have been thinking just seconds ago that it's self-evident that taking drugs or alcohol prior to flight is a bad idea. And yet, the document I mentioned at the beginning of this video gives us some real insight into how prevalent the use of alcohol and drugs are and how they affect us. It tells us that between 2000 and 2007, of the fatal accidents investigated, roughly 9% involved alcohol and drugs, or alcohol or drugs. The point being, that's a pretty high number. And it is unfortunate these are fatal accidents, and sometimes they take passengers with them. Keep in mind, when we fly with passengers, they're assuming we're on top of our game. They get in with us. They climb into that airplane believing we know what we're doing and we're safe. Even when we fly alone, however, there are still people back home expecting to see us again. We have the responsibility as human beings to behave appropriately. And when we're going to do something as challenging as flying an airplane, riding a motorcycle, driving a car in traffic, we do have a responsibility to do that to the best of our ability. And there's no way to do it to the best of our ability if we've been drinking or if we've been taking some type of drug that affects us. There are some examples in this document, and there are plenty throughout history of why this is such a big deal. Consider the 37-year-old pilot flying alone who collided with power lines on his approach to the airport. He had an offense for alcohol previously, and the investigation into the accident did discover he was impaired by alcohol, which resulted in the destruction of the aircraft and the death of the pilot. Or the 46-year-old pilot who was killed when his Cessna 152 crashed on a night flight. And the investigation determined that alcohol impairment combined with flying at night caused this aircraft to crash and this pilot to depart this earth. Or the 50-year-old who was flying an experimental aircraft which crashed, destroying the aircraft, killing the pilot, who had had prior alcohol-related issues and was determined to have been impaired by alcohol at the time of the crash. We all know that night flight has its own considerations. And night flight combined with instrument meteorological conditions takes a whole other level of proficiency to be able to do it safely. Combine that with the intake of alcohol and you have a true tragedy unfolding, which is exactly what happened to a 48-year-old pilot flying a PA-28-180, and that flight did not work out well because of the combination of challenging factors and the pilot's impairment due to alcohol consumption. Or maybe we have the story of the 52-year-old CFI who's on an instructional flight with a student, and because he's been drinking, he doesn't react well to a departure. Gets slow, the aircraft stalls, he does not handle the stall well, the aircraft crashes. The instructor was killed, the student survived. That is incredibly unprofessional, and it is very much a dereliction of duty, whether that flight student is paying you or whether it's just a friend or a relative that you're taking flying. To be impaired at the controls of an airplane and leave the ground is just not something any one of us wants to be our legacy. Unfortunately, the long and the short of it is, while we would like to believe that pilots are at a whole different level, really professional, really proficient, they take what they do seriously, the reality is we're just regular old people. We screw up. We have foibles, and some of us have real issues with alcohol or drugs. The point of this is, take this seriously. You don't want to be the person who takes off thinking, well, I've just had one beer. That could be the factor. Or someone who has developed a long-term drinking issue or became dependent on an over-the-counter drug or a prescription drug that alters their ability to function normally. People will often get used to that condition and start thinking, well, that is what normal is, and it's not. Each and every one of us has a responsibility to be the best pilot we can be, not Bob Hoover, not the very best. We have an obligation to be safe. And I've said this many times. I'm very proud of my career, the number of certificates I had, the number of experiences I've had, but I'm not the greatest pilot in the world, and I never was. I shoot for being safe. I try to be proficient. I try to work on maneuvers, so I really do have control of the aircraft. And when I make cross-country flights, I always have an out. I have a plan B or a plan C, so if something untoward happens, I'm not just stuck trying to figure out what to do. But I have never taken off after consuming an alcoholic beverage. And I have never taken a prescription or recreational drug and then gone flying thinking, this will probably work out. as I've said many, many times, if you're in the planning phase of a flight, any flight, local or cross country, and you find yourself thinking, this will probably work, that's a hard no. Probably is not a word that we want in our lexicon as we plan our flights. So try to be cautious, try to be conservative, and try to be honest with yourself, even if you can't be with anybody else. If you've got a drinking problem, deal with it. If you've got a DUI or an OWI or whatever they call it, where you are on your record, talk to your AME, your aviation medical examiner. How can I deal with this? Keep my medical, continue flying, and maybe I need to treat that problem, because one thing they've found over the years, people generally don't get caught for drunk driving the first time they drive drunk. The reality is the odds are with them. They've done it many, many times. If you're lucky, you get caught. If you're unlucky and the people around you are unlucky as well, something happens that you weren't prepared for that you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. As we think about our flying career, as we think about just being a general aviation pilot out there having fun, let's make sure beyond the fun, beyond the sharing the joy of flying, beyond showing off the scenery and the experience of being able to go wherever we want in 3 dimensions, let's make sure we do it as safely as we possibly can. And we do it stone cold sober every damn time. Hey, thanks so much for watching. I do appreciate it. I hope to see you back here next time at Mad Props Aero, because we do 2 videos a week and we'd love to have you on board with us.